Today our speaker, David Mayley, as he's known to termites, Dr. Death. He is here today to share with you the story of the termite as it impacts us in Hancock County and otherwise. Dave was born in New Orleans, and educationally he studied biology and chemistry at the University of New Orleans. He learned his leadership skills through a Masonic-sponsored youth program, and I've known David prior to Katrina, and I've watched him in his leadership role with the Bay St. Louis Rotary Club, which he's been president of. And he is very engaged in our community and has excellent leadership skills and has done a lot for Rotary and a lot for our community. He started his pest control business in 1981, working for a national pest control. And in Louisiana and Mississippi, he trained operators on chemicals and chemical uses. He moved to Bay St. Louis in 1996 and opened pest control specialties on April Fool's Day in 1996. Later on, he actually started a flight school in New Orleans in 2009. And while he himself did not teach flying, he owned the school and subsequently sold it, and it's still in operation. Cool Breeze Aviation. As I mentioned, Dave's been president of the Rotary Club on 2 occasions, Bay Waveland School Board member, active in the Chamber of Commerce, American Cancer Society, Relay for Life. He's done a lot of giving in his time. He's got 2 children and 5 grandchildren, and his hobbies, as you may well know, is playing in a band. So he and model rocketry, golf, fishing, flying, studying World War II and Vietnam War history. So we're delighted to have Dave with us today to share his comments and his role as Dr. Death.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, that was very generous what you said there. I appreciate that. Thank you much. Let me start this off. Who all has had termite problems in this room? Raise your hand. Okay, quite a bunch of them. In that flight instruction school, I was actually the student, but we had 2 flight instructors, and they're still up at Stennis Airport right now, so it's all going good. Let me start this off by saying, I wish I had something good to say. I wish I could be really upbeat, but Hancock County and most of the Gulf Coast, but we have it the worst. We're probably in a crisis right now with these termites. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge everybody from my church family's here. Thank you all for being here. Of course, you realize the pressure's on me now because they're going to go back to the pastor and say, well, either he did good or he did bad. So I don't know where we're going to go with that. And I've also got some people from the Rotary Club, and I want to thank them for being here too. And again, the pressure's on because they're going to go back and say, Dave really butchered it. So I don't know. So we're really in a crisis right now. Formosa termites, which is what I'm going to talk about today, there's really no other way to say it. They're horrible. I mean, it's just what I'm going to say. But what I will tell you is I see hope in the future. So what we're going to talk about, don't get, oh God, this is so down and depressing, because I think that there's hope in the future, but I think it's a little ways away. Next slide, please. Slide, man. All right. So here's where we are today, right? I had a friend that took this picture and said, Dave, I got the best picture for you. This is going to be great. So what that is that's Formosa termites swarming at a street light on Main Street. And that's what they do. They're attracted towards lights at night, and they swarm at night. And that's just typical of how they spread their colonies. Next slide. That's my best picture right there, I got to tell you. I love that. Next slide. So a little bit of history about Formosa termites. I started in this business in 1981. I moved over here from New Orleans in 96. When I first started in the pest control business in 96, I'm going to tell you probably 1 to 2% of my treatments were Formosa termites. They just weren't that big of a problem, but they were getting started. 98, 99% of my treatments were our native subterranean species that we have here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in the years since 96 to present, I've watched the Formosans grow and I've watched the native subterraneans go away. So pretty much now, all we fight is Formosan termites. And they're a horrible foe. They're big colonies, they're aggressive, they damage houses real quickly. There's just no way to sugarcoat it, I guess is the best way I'm saying. What happened, like a lot of insects and a lot of problems in the United States, is we brought them here. Formosan termites are not native to the United States. We don't think, we're sure. We brought them back after World War II in crates and boxes and shipping containers that came from China, the southeastern coast of Asia, that area. And we brought them back in ships, we brought them back on boats, planes, however they got here, and we brought them into basically 4 ports: Galveston, New Orleans, Mobile, and Savannah, South Carolina. Did I get that right? Yeah. Georgia. So yeah, there you go. My bad. Yeah. But that's the ports that we brought them into. And if we were alive back then, if you looked at the Mississippi River was lined with ships bringing soldiers back or equipment back. I mean, it was just ship after ship after ship. And that's where they really got established, is in New Orleans. And then, of course, every year they spread a little bit. They're now over here. When I first got into the business over here in 96, I could name the areas that had the worst Formosan infestations. I knew it was going to be South Waveland. I knew it was going to be Henderson Point. And I knew it was going to be right by where the bridge goes across the bay. Right where, what's the subdivision there now? Chapel Hill. That was the worst areas that we knew of. And of course now they're just everywhere. Next slide. Slide, man. Yeah. So this is where we know they came from: Korea, Japan, Taiwan, which was called Formosa back then, right? Really? Yeah, that's where Formosan termites, Vietnam, all those areas. We just brought them back in shipping that came back to us. Next slide. So, what this shows you is, we call it termite pressure. The red's going to be the heaviest pressure in the United States. Look where we are in all that, right? We're kind of right about in the center of it. But we know that in this area, if you put a piece of wood on the ground within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's probably going to get termites. In my business, we do a lot of work where we do termite pre-treatments. People are building a new house, and so, they get lumber delivered. The contractor gets lumber delivered, and it sits in the yard while the guys are putting it up in the house. And I've had calls more than one time, many times actually, where the contractor says, "Dave, we had this lumber delivered 2.5 weeks ago, and my guys were pulling it out to put it in the house. It's already got termites in it. Can you come spray the wood where it sits on the ground?" So, I mean, it's gotten bad. Again, it's going to be kind of depressing, but what I'm going to tell you towards the end is I think there's hope in sight, so that's a good thing. Next slide. And if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and blurt them out. So termites in nature are very important. They're part of the ecosystem. Mother Nature, is very complicated, and she's very good at what she does. Termites in nature, they take trees that fall to the ground, the diseased trees, branches that fall, they feed on them, and they return them to the elements. In turn, Formosans are the bottom of the food chain. Everybody feeds on them. Bigger insects, even bears will feed on termites. So they play a very important role in the ecosystem by being the bottom of the food chain, but also helping to keep the forest floors a little bit clean. So the problem is, next slide. Oh, there you go, that's the problem. The problem is that we build our houses out of what they want to feed on. So behind all, but go back. Sorry, can you go back? Beautiful house, behind all that stone is thousands and thousands of pounds of lumber. And believe it or not, termites are very, very good at finding their way into those walls and feeding on the lumber. And you don't know about it until that infestation typically has already progressed to an unfortunate state. Next slide. And of course, that's a house built on a slab. House built above the ground, like we call it a crawl space house. They go right up the piers and get right into the house and just do the destruction that they'll do. Next slide. That slide's a little, it's kind of, okay, so this is native subterranean swarmers. All right, and again, remember when I first got here, this is pretty much all I used to fight, native subterranean colonies. The colony might be 400,000 termites, might be 650,000 termites. They live in the ground, they're subterranean species, they live in the ground. They come up, they form tunnels to get into a house, feed on the wood, but the damage is done on a relative scale slowly because of the colony size. Next slide. Well, let me say one more thing about this one. You go ahead and leave it there. Let me say one more thing about the native subterranean termites. They swarm during the day. You know, we know it's going to happen in February, March, April, a nice warm early spring day around 11 o'clock or so. They're going to leave the colony to try to start new colonies. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. If you understand how a Formosan termite colony or a native subterranean colony works, you kind of get a better indication or a better understanding of how they get into your house. And that's what's critical. I mean, I think the most important slide I'm going to show you is the slide of how a colony is structured. We'll talk about that. But these guys swarm during the day. They're called eastern subterranean termites. There's a couple of different species. You see Reticulotermes flavipes. There's a couple of other types too. So there's ways to tell when you have a termite colony what kind of colony you have. When you have swarmers, if you're going to have a black swarmer or you're going to have a soldier and his head is rectangular, well, you know you've got a native subterranean colony. That's the easiest way to identify them. Next slide. Does anybody have any questions so far? It's all clear as mud, right? All right. These are Formosan termite swarmers and Formosan termite soldiers. Yes, sir?
How long do they live?
A lot of conditions come into play. In laboratories, we'll get them to live about a year, but we think they live about 10 months to 15 months. The queens, we're told, can live 15 to 20 years. So this is Formosan termites, and that's the swarmers, which are the reproductives of the colony, and then that's the soldiers all around them. And the soldiers are real distinctive on Formosan colonies. The head is kind of teardrop shaped, as opposed to the native subs being like a rectangular shape. So if you just find the soldiers, you can tell, hey, is it eastern subterranean or is it Formosan by looking at the shape of the head. But there's even a more fascinating characteristic that defines the Formosan termite soldiers. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, they do that. That's not the slide I was looking for, but that's the difference between the two swarmers right there. And again, these are called the reproductives of the colony. We call them swarmers, but their mission is to leave an established colony, fly 10 feet or fly 250 yards, land, mate, and start a new colony. Next slide. Y'all have a picture. I put some stuff on the tables before y'all showed up. There's a picture of a flying ant and a flying termite. Ants swarm all year round, but they swarm heaviest right when termites swarm. And so we'll get a lot of calls in my company, hey man, we got these bugs in our house. I think we got termites, and we'll go out there and you can look at them and say, oh no, this is going to be a swarming ant. So everybody knows what fire ants are, right? Red ants, fire ants, they sting like heck. They swarm all year round, but they typically swarm heaviest starting about February for about the end of summer. Formosan termites start swarming typically about April till about the middle of June, really, is what we see here. So it's nice to be able to tell the difference, and there's some real key characteristics. I tell people a Formosan termite body kind of looks like a cigar, whereas a fire ant or an ant swarmer has an hourglass shaped kind of body. Yeah, I was going to say a belly dancer, so thank you, Chris. Thank you for doing that. Another thing is that termites have an elbowed antenna, ants have a straight antenna. So you just got to be able to tell the difference. And all ant species swarm. They all have flying members of their colony, as do termites. So it's easy to get them confused. Next slide, sir. This, I think, is the most important slide we have. If you understand, I know it doesn't look too interesting, but if you understand how termite colonies, specifically the Formosans, because that's all we have, you kind of understand what happens and how they get into your house. So where do I start on this slide? I'm going to start with, I guess, the king and the queen. All right? So you see the king and you see the queen. The queen's abdomen is a lot larger, right? In the Formosan colony, she becomes an egg-laying machine. That's all she does her entire life. In the colony, they say a mature Formosan colony, the queen can lay as many as 1,000 eggs a day. I don't know who did that. I don't know what researcher counted that. I'm glad it wasn't me, but that's what they say can happen. And she can live, what did I say, 15 to 20 years? You want to do the math there, huh? It's ugly. It's very ugly. So the king and the queen, they stay in the colony. They're cared for by other members of the colony. The king and the queen, they don't go out and chew wood and come back to the colony and pass it around and feed it. They're in that colony all the time, and they're fed by the other termites. So let's go past the king and the queen. The queen lays eggs, okay? When the eggs hatch, they're either going to become supplementary reproductives, so a colony could have more than one king and queen in it. The supplementary reproductive can develop to become another king and a queen. And fire ant colonies do the same thing. They'll have multiple kings and queens in them. But the Formosan colony, you might have one queen, you might have 7. Nobody really knows. More importantly, when those eggs hatch, out comes the larvae. And in the world of entomology, this is called an incomplete metamorphosis, just so you'll know. They go from egg to larval stages to adult. Whereas like a butterfly or a flea, they go from an egg to a larvae to a pupa to an adult. That's a complete metamorphosis. This is called incomplete metamorphosis. So the eggs go to a larvae, and then from the larvae, they can go to 3 different things: worker, soldier, or nymph. Now let's talk about what these guys do in the colony, because it's real important. The worker termite is the one that's going to leave the colony and it's going to look for food. And they're going to, if there's a colony in your yard, research has shown that they just randomly forage under the ground all over. It's scattered, no rhyme or reason. They're looking to bump into things. If it's a good food source, they'll feed on it, bring it back to the colony. When they get back to the colony, they'll pass it to the other termites. And that's a process where they'll either regurgitate it or they'll pass it out their backside. And the next termite in line will feed on it, and they'll do the same thing. They'll feed on it, and sometimes they'll pass it out their backside, or they'll regurgitate it. And so the food gets passed to all the termites in the colony. Now, the worker termites, they're the biggest segment of the colony because they do everything. They go out, they feed on the food. They also care for the colony. So the colony has to be maintained. There's fungus gardens that they keep in the colony that have to be maintained. They do all the work. They keep the king and queen clean so they don't develop any diseases. I mean, these guys do everything in the colony. If a termite dies, they'll drag the body out. They do everything. The soldier, and the workers feed everybody. The soldier is an interesting character. It cannot feed itself. It's got those big mandibles which are made to defend the colony. And the number 1 and 2 enemies of a termite colony or other termite colonies are ants. So with these big sharp mandibles, they can defend themselves and they can protect the colony, but they can't feed themselves. So they have to be fed by the worker termites. In And I guess this helps you understand how the Formosa termites have gone from 2% of my business to 98, 99% of my business in the span of 25 years. In a native subterranean colony, the native subs we've had for thousands of years here, maybe 1 or 2 or 3% are soldiers. In a Formosan colony, it can be as high as 15% of the colony is soldier termites. And probably, I'm going to guess, I really don't know, but I'm going to guess, just haven't done this so long, probably 60% or 65% are the worker termites. But in a Formosan, 10, 15, 20% is really not uncommon. The third one is the nymph. And this is really interesting because we're starting to see them right now. If we bust open into a colony, we see these guys developing. They're the ones that are going to be the sexually active members of the colony, and they're being fed and taken care of by the worker termites. And their mission, when the time is right, when Mother Nature says, well, you know, the temperature's correct, the humidity's correct, there's been a rain, all the conditions are good, it's light wind, they get a signal to swarm from the colony. They leave the colony. Their mission is to fly 5 feet away, 10 feet away, or 300 yards away. And again, these are the sexually active members of the colony, the only ones. Once they finish swarming, they'll land, they'll shake their wings off, and it's an amazing thing. I've actually seen it happen. They fly, and they're not good flyers, they're not strong, but it's, you know, they fly, and you saw the picture in front of the light post. When they land, they'll shake their wings a different way, and they just fall off, because they never need them again. They never need them at all after that. Once they land, a male will find the female. And I got a slide, I'm going to show you how that works. And he will follow her wherever she goes. And she's looking for damp soil or potentially damp wood. And they'll burrow into it, they'll mate, she'll lay eggs, and they become the king and queen of a new colony. So if Mike had an infestation in his backyard, and they swarmed 7:30 at night, and they went to Mr. Bill's house 300 yards away, and a female and a male were able to land, and the conditions in the soil were right, or he had a bad soffit, or he had a plumbing leak behind his shower that he didn't know about, and they were able to, you know, it just takes a tiny crack for them to get in. They were able to get in. If there's damp wood or damp soil, they can start a new colony, either in the house or in the ground. And that's what we fight all the time. So that's really, really important to understand how this thing works. Those reproductives, they're technically called alates. So when the alates swarm, if they go 25 yards from your house to your house, and they land next to your house, you could end up with an infestation from your neighbor's yard, you know, a year or two later. And listen, this process is very hard. Mother Nature is very cruel. It's very hard that they do this. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to speed this up a little bit. This is about a 3.5-hour talk, and I'm trying to make it fit in about 35 minutes. So I'll do what I can. Next slide. Anyway, look, that's very important to know to understand how the colonies work. So here's a picture of a queen, and you see the soldiers down there. Now this is a different species. This is a drywood termite infestation. Very rare to find them, but we do find them. But you see all the colored workers around them? The researchers fed them wood that had a dye in it, so they could kind of track them. And so that's what you're seeing there. That's why all the worker termites, and you see them, they're all taking care of the queen, and the soldiers are just sitting there looking around, waiting for somebody to attack, so they can attack them back. Next slide. Okay, just another picture. This would be native subterranean termites, because that head on the soldier is rectangular. Next slide. You get some fascinating slides in this business. Okay, here is the Formosan termite soldier and the worker. It looks like the workers are trying to care for them, keep them clean or whatever. Next slide. All right, it's a good picture of the Formosan termite soldier. Next slide. I'm looking for a specific slide. All right. We'll get to it. It's going to pop up in a second. So termite colonies are in the ground, okay? They're called a native subterranean species or Formosan subterranean species. The problem is Formosans are really good and making above ground infestations if the conditions are right, i.e. damp wood. When termites leave the ground to get into your house, they have to protect themselves. So they do it by building a real characteristic tunnel that we look for. In our industry, that's what we look for. I mean, I've driven up to people's houses and haven't gotten out of my truck, and I've seen the tunnels coming up their slab. Okay, we got an infestation going here, guys. You know, but this is what they do. And so the termites are crawling up that slab to get to the wood that's in the wall. If they didn't build that protective tunnel, they would be eaten by lizards, geckos, spiders, other insects, birds, you know, whatever. So they build that to protect themselves, but also termites have to regulate the humidity around them. They're very sensitive to desiccation, drying out. So this helps them maintain a good degree of moisture as they're trying to get from the ground into your house. They're going to feed maybe for a couple hours, and then they're going to head right back down, travel to the colony, regurgitate the food, pass it out the backside. And look, there's a name for that process. You know, I guess if you just regurgitating it, you're regurgitating it. But when it comes out your backside, it's a name called trophallaxis. Look that one up. Trophallaxis, that's what they do. But anyway, that's what they do to protect themselves. In most cases, this is what we're looking for to find an active infestation. And sometimes we'll pop these tunnels open with a screwdriver, which probably, besides a flashlight, is our most important tool. You know, we don't have complicated $10,000 pieces of equipment. We've got a flashlight and a screwdriver. Sometimes we'll pop it open and there'll be nothing in there. But in most cases, it's a highway for termites going up and down. And as the infestation grows, those tunnels get wider and wider. And I think I'm going to have a slide real soon showing that. But you know, a new infestation is going to be about the size of an ink pen. A long-term Formosa infestation might be 3 or 4 or 5 inches wide. Next slide. All right, so that's a new infestation. You see the tunnels coming up right there. Next slide. This is an old. This came from. I'm not going to tell you where, but this came from downtown Bay St. Louis. I will tell you, not 2 blocks from here. I will tell you. So I'm going to tell you. But it's been taken care of. They're gone. But I mean, this is, you know, when we see something like that, you know, that tunnel's that wide, and the homeowner will say, well, how long have they been here? Well, we could say we're not really sure, but probably for a little while. Next slide is another slide up. Next slide. That's a different angle of a different pier, so you can see what happens. And what they do is, even though they got that tunnel, you see how they branch off. They always are exploring for new sources of food. It's just random how they do it, but it's constant. Next slide. I don't know if you can see the tunnel right there, but the problem was there was a door on the second story above this. And they had all kind of water leaks, and all that wood above it is just soaking wet. And the termites found it, and they loved it. So, but that tunnel's probably about, you know, that wide or so. That's a cinder block pier. And if you pop it open, there's just literally hundreds of termites going back and forth. They're going up to feed, and then they're coming back down to go pass it to the colony. Mr. Bryan?
Is that why the houses with piers have tin on them?
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, historically, that tin was put on brick and mortar piers to keep the wood from absorbing the moisture from the bricks. So that was the original reason for those shieldings. We discovered later on that they did help slow termites down, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen that metal rust away, or I've seen termites go around them, or I've seen like a little pinhole develop for rust. And when they get rusted, they get very dangerous. I've got the scars to prove it. So, next slide. But that's originally what it was for. It was to keep the wood on top of the brick and mortar pier from absorbing the moisture that the piers would take in. House on Main Street, the insulation had fallen to the ground. And that's a tunnel coming up the insulation. Geez, what are these, you know, what do you do with this one? You know, because when we treat a house, we don't treat all the ground underneath the house. We treat what they call as the construction elements that come to the ground, the piers, whatever. We don't really treat fallen insulation. So that was a kind of a special case there. Next slide. And I think we want to pass this next one. Let's see what we got. All right, so this was a house where the tree grew into the house and they had termites in it and they want to know why. Well, so here's part of your problem. Next slide. I'm going to try to speed this up because I don't want to keep everybody here at 4 o'clock. So somebody asked me about a carton nest. I can't remember who it was, but when Formosan termites get into a wall, remember they had supplementary reproductives? Remember in that colony there's a main king and a queen, and then there's supplementary reproductives? So in many cases, they'll form what we call as a carton nest, and that's just a nest that's in the wall of a house. If you were to come to my office, we have a room we call the laboratory, and in that laboratory, I've probably got 20 or 30 carton nests that we've pulled out of people's walls. I could get one every day if I wanted to, because that's how often we see these nests in people's walls. You know, they open up the wall. When people say, hey, I got termites, and we know where they are, sometimes we'll treat them. Sometimes we'll say, listen, I need you to do what I call exploratory surgery so we can determine how bad this infestation is. And people say, well, what's exploratory surgery? As we just start opening up the wall little bit by little bit until we find out where they stop. And I'll have people call me back and say, well, it was that entire wall, plus it was the wall next to it and the one next to it. It never ends. But this is a typical carton nest. So you see that one? That's about I think a 6-inch ruler, if I remember, or 8-inch ruler. So, and that's a small one. I mean, I've got them this big. And like if there's 2 studs in a wall, sheetrock, and then what they call the outer sheathing, that colony will take up that entire space. When we pull it out, it's nice and square. It just fits into the wall. Next slide. All right. Lots of times people find out they have termites, and that's not the best slide, but it's just the one I have. Lots of times people find out they have termites in their house when all of a sudden they're looking at a wall and there's this dirt that wasn't there yesterday. And we really don't have a good name for this thing, but what that is that's where the termites have built up into a wall. Typically it's in springtime and they're preparing to swarm out. I've heard them called launch ramps, star cap. I've heard all kind of names. I call them termite Formosan swarming launch ramps because we don't really have a good technical term for it. But what they'll do is they'll build up in the wall, and the day before they'll swarm or 2 days before they'll swarm, they'll build these ramps or these launch sites, and when it's 7:30 at night, the Formosan termites will come pouring out of these things, just one after another. And when I say Formosan termite swarm, a typical colony might produce, we really don't know, 35 to 75,000 swarmers. I mean, I've had people call me at 9:30 at night, I'm going to a hotel, I can't stay in my house. It's like a biblical plague. And I've heard this not many times, but I've heard it on more than one occasion. And what that is, it's just a launch ramp so the termites can swarm out. And Mother Nature says, look, guys, you're not good flyers. You're not the best at it. So I want you to build up high so that when you launch out, you'll be able to fly a few yards away from the mother colony and start a new colony. We think that's what's going on. Formosan termite launch ramps. Next slide. Interesting thing. When termites are preparing to swarm, it's funny, and we can watch this happen. The soldiers will ring the launch site to protect the swarmers who come flying out. They're there just to make sure nobody messes with those swarmers that are going to, procreate and make a new colony. It's a fascinating thing to see. A little aside, real quick. I was playing a band job once, and this is really a true story. And we're setting up like 2 or 3, 4 in the afternoon, and I'm not going to tell you where, but it's a place here in town. And we're setting up, and I'm looking around, and I see those launch ramps along the edge of the ceiling. And I said, let me go. They got me a ladder, and I got up there, and you scrape them off with my screwdriver, my most important tool. And man, all these termites, the soldiers are coming out, and I can see the swarmers back in there, getting ready for swarming in a couple hours. So we had to stop setting up, and I went out to my truck, and I actually got a product, and I treated all along there so we could have that event go on that night, and the event wasn't ruined by thousands of termite swarmers coming in, right when they were serving dinner. And that's really a true story that happened. Next slide. But that's what they do to soldiers. They ring that area. Again, once the alates, the reproductives, the swarmers land, they shake their wings off and never need them again. So when I see something like that, I can typically say, yes, we have a problem going on here. Houston, we have a problem. So next slide. I'm trying to hurry up, guys. I want a couple of more things. Typical ways termites get into a house. It just doesn't take much. Everybody in May says, man, I got thousands of wings in my attic. Everybody says, I got thousands of wings. And if we crawl in the attic, as we're crawling, wings are just floating up in the air like that. So one of the easiest way for termites to get into your house is through that ridge vent, and they'll filter in. But keep in mind, when these swarmers land, they have to find damp wood or damp soil pretty quickly. If not, they're going to dry out and die in about 24 to 48 hours. So we'll see the wings, but typically the swarmers get down in the insulation and you never see them again. They die. But their wings, when they land, they're all up there. We see them everywhere. So, but this is typical of how they get into a house. Yes, sir.
Is one type of housing veneer worse for being infested than not, like dry-vit or brick or
Yes.
stucco? Or...
Yeah. What I'll say is probably a monolithic slab with a high visible slab and a brick veneer is probably the safest way to build a house with a big overhang, because that keeps water off of it. Probably the worst things is stucco into the ground, that drive-it you're talking about that goes into the ground. Vinyl siding has so many gaps and openings, it's easy for termites to find their way in. If there's a water problem around a window, they'll start a colony right then and there. So I would say synthetic stucco, fake stucco, drive-it. After Katrina, there was people that build houses, it was foam block with cement in it, and there was always gaps in it. And termites would go in there. Here, little aside here, and look, I don't want to offend anybody, but this is what I see. If you have a house on a cinder block chain wall, and it's got a slab on top of it, but you're built up on a cinder block chain wall and your house is on top of it, that is the worst house for termite activity. It's extremely hard to treat. To treat them properly is very, very difficult. But more important is that the termites typically are going to be hidden until they show up in your walls during swarm season. So, if that helps out any. Chris?
Question. Why do you see tenting in New Orleans and you don't see tenting over here?
Good question. That's typically drywood termites, and it's typically in older houses that are raised off the ground. We have drywoods here. They're not nearly the problem that they are in New Orleans. New Orleans has a much bigger incidence of older homes that have been there for a long time, and those homes are more susceptible to drywood termites. Drywood termites are small colonies. They don't have ground contact. They get up into a crawl space of a house raised off the ground, and they'll start colonies in 1 or 2 pieces of wood or 7 or 8 pieces of wood. And sometimes the easiest way to get rid of them is to fumigate, put the tent on them. We've had it done here. We fumigate, my company fumigated a storage warehouse last year for drywood termites, and they were in the pallets. And they couldn't get rid of it, and the pallets and all in the framing and everything. So, but drywood termites typically aren't a problem, but that's why you see a lot of fumigation going on. Next slide. Does anybody have to leave real quick? Yeah, it's just your typical another way they get in the house. Keep going. That's what you can do to solve the problem. Keep going. Look, here's what I tell people. When I'm talking to customers, we're an advisor, basically. The outside shell of your house has to stay perfectly sealed and perfectly dry to keep termites out. It's easy for me to say that. In reality, it's very hard to do. If your house is raised off the ground 12 feet to the first floor and the windows on the second floor have problems around it, it's really hard for you to go up there and look at it to see, hey, I think I need to caulk here where termites could possibly get in. But the outside shell has to stay perfectly dry. Next slide. I'm not going to tell you where that is. I'm not going to tell you. But it's here in town. They're all here in town. So enclosed crawl houses where it's tough to get into them, It's another worst kind of situation you could have. Just not an easy house to inspect, and not an easy house to protect, and a very expensive house to try to treat properly. Next slide. I got plenty of goofy slides, no doubt. All right, so these are termite tunnels that are freestanding, coming from a house in Waveland. I'm crawling into the house in Waveland, and there's these termite tunnels this far from the wood that they've infested to the ground. And there's a cinder block pier 10 feet away, but these guys decided, I guess, this was a quicker way to get to the colony for us to get to the ground and get to the colony. So that's what happened. You see it every now and then. Next slide. The study of termites, the more and more as my career has gone on, you learn to hate them, but you truly learn to respect their abilities. You hate what they do to people because we see it every day. We see destruction, we see damage every day, but you really respect their capabilities and how close to the perfect insect creature God's created, unfortunately. Next slide. That's it. We call this house, go back to that slide if you could. I'm going to tell you something about it. So when we treat a house, we do a contract, and we have to describe the type of house. So we call this house camp style over slab. So if you have a contract with my company or possibly a company I've worked for in the past, the contract might say 1 camp style over slab home. And some of these homes are 4,000 square foot mansions. And I've had people kind of get a little bit miffed at the fact, I'm just going to say it there, they've got a little bit, what do you mean it's a camp? Well, I'm not, it's just a description we use. I guess I could put 1 mansion over slab, But I've had people actually get upset. So you see where the air conditioning is? If where the decking for the air conditioning meets the house, if that's not properly sealed, water can get in there, you can have moisture problems, it'll show up underneath if you look at it from underneath, but that's also where the termites get in at. This camp style over slab house, that's the #1 place we see termites in these kind of houses. They're not going to eat the pressure treated lumber. The piers underneath it, they're not going to eat that. They won't do it. Pressure treatment kills them. They'll tunnel up it. Sometimes they have cracks in them. We call them chinks. Sometimes they have little cracks, and they'll tunnel up into it to get to the wood. But where that AC unit meets is probably the most common place we find termites in a mansion over slab house. Next slide.
Are colonies always in the ground?
So they are subterranean termites. That's what they're classified. Most times they're in the ground. The Formosans are really good if there's a water problem up above. Their entire colony can be up in the air. The $10 million question, as the colony grows, it looks like, from experience, they try to find a way to the ground. Because they are a subterranean termite, they want to be in the ground. So as the colony grows, sometimes we'll see exploratory tunnels trying to get to the ground so that the colony can further expand. But Formosans are really good at these above ground infestations with no ground contact. But with that said, they are native subterranean, not native, they're a subterranean species.
Yeah, with those green treatment devices.
I'm going to get to that in a minute. I promise you. Good, you're leading into it. Next slide. Remember I said this is not going to be a fun talk. I don't have good news. But I did say there was hope on the horizon. Y'all remember me saying that. That's what we're going to talk about. So this is called a floating slab. This is the slab inside of a house. We don't build them like this too much anymore. But there's a seam right there. That's a cinder block wall that goes up with a slab that comes up against it. And there's a slab seam right there. In our industry, we got a lot of colorful names. We call that a floating slab. So if that's hidden by molding and sheetrock and wood flooring, the termites love to eat on it, and they got an easy place to get to. And to treat it, we have to tear up somebody's floor or carpet, right? And say, look, we're going to drill a hole, half-inch hole every 12 inches to treat this properly, if you don't mind. Next slide. It's crazy. It's a crazy business. Cinder block chain wall. Remember I told you this is not the best way to build a house? Go back to that cinder block. So we treat the ground, all right, and we typically try to treat in here unless they've already poured cement in it. But this spot right here typically doesn't get a good treatment. And so if this is 7 cinder blocks, in our treatment we spray the sop, but 5 feet down, there's really not a treatment in this red dirt. the termites will find these kind of gaps and cracks, and they'll get into that cinder block wall, and there's not typically going to be cement in here, so that's how they get up into the wall of your house. Keep in mind, the slab sits right here, then there's a plate down there, and then your wall's right there, and that's how they get into cinder block house. We never know until come springtime and they swarm out, and that's when you find out that you've got termites for the first time. Next slide. It's just another picture of it. Just another picture of a cinder block chain wall. The cement's never really done that well. And keep in mind, this is the outside, which is where the workers are trying to make it look prettier than the inside. The inside's always worse. Next slide. Look, in this business, you gotta study construction. So that's where they're getting ready to put the plate on, that wooden plate that sits on the bottom that your walls are built on, and you see the hole right there. Next slide. We're advisors to a lot of people. Typically, a termite treatment, the traditional way to treat a house is a liquid barrier around your house and in your bath traps. And when termites try to penetrate through that barrier, the chemical that remains there with residual activity kills them. But when we have situations like this where the drain comes down and it washes the dirt away, well, it's also washing our treatment away. And so that makes our treatment less effective. So lots of times when we go to houses, we say, look, we don't see termites, but we see conditions that could make your house more attractive to termites. Conducive conditions, we call them. And that would be a classic conducive condition where that drain should probably be funneled away from the house in some way or some fashion. Next slide. I'm running out of time here, guys. It's a race. All right, termites and firewood next to a house. Next slide. That's my hand with the ink pen. Hancock Bank ink pen. How did that happen? I don't know. That's another picture of me. Termites and firewood. Next slide. So here's a good picture where the drain, the drain has really washed our treatment away. You can see how that, and look, get one of those splash block things. I mean, I'm going to tell you, for a couple of years, back early in my career, we actually used to sell or give them to people just to help their houses out. Because, if your house is safer for you, it's also safe for my company if I have your house under contract. So I actually used to give them out. We don't do it anymore, but we actually gave a number of them out. Next slide. And you see, there's your slab there. And so if termites were going to come up, there's going to be a nice little characteristic tunnel. The wood rot is also a factor in houses. Next slide. We're going to keep going here. It's a toilet that had an infestation under it. The homeowner had already cleaned all the carton nest out because he was trying to save the toilet. And so I just got that picture. Next slide. It's crazy what they do. And what happened, it was leaking around that wax ring. So all that wood was rotted, and he went to fix it because a crawl house raised off the ground, it was kind of giving way. Well, when he opened it up, he found termites were all in the floor. He ended up taking out like 2 rooms of flooring to fix that problem. Termites get into trees. That's typically, and I'm going to tell you, probably, I'm going to say 30 or 40% of the trees we look at have termites in them. Typically, you're going to see it in springtime when they're making tunnels up, but that's what they look like. People say that cedar trees, have you ever heard this, cedar wood doesn't get termites? Come to my office, go into the laboratory, and there's a stump about that big of a cedar tree, and the whole inside's eaten out from Formosa termites. So whenever you want to come by and look at the laboratory, you're welcome to do it. Next slide. And I kind of joke about this, but it keeps me from going insane, I think. But it's not really it's not a fun subject. This is what you're going to see in springtime if you've got an infestation in your tree. You're going to see a tunnel like that. If you pop it open with your hand or an ink pen, you're going to see termites going up and down. Next slide. All right, here we go. Keep going. That's a little carton nest that I pulled out of the center right there. All right. Termites get into boats. I'm going to tell you right now, we treat boats. We mentioned the Centricon system. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And I'm not going to try to sell you guys on it because I'm not a salesman. I'm just going to present the facts. But Centricon, these bait stations that go in the ground, they also have what's called an above ground component. And it's just a little bait box with the bait in there. We mix it up. We put it where we find the termites. and the termites will feed on it, take it back to where the nest is in a boat, the colony, and pass it around through that trophallaxis process, and we can kill the colony in a boat where we typically can't find it, because if you know a boat, there's a lot of areas you'll never get to. But we do find termites in a boat. Right now, my company has 2 boats that are actively being treated for Formosa termites. Next slide. And we look for certain things. So like we look for that tunnel in a boat. You know, that's the kind of stuff we look for. Next slide. Oh, and listen, here's a funny story. So people, I had people say, Dave, how do I keep, they say, look, you can kill the termites in my boat today, right? Yeah, we can kill it. We put the Centricon out, it kills the termites. What about next spring? What about next swarm season? Well, your boat can get reinfested. And they said, well, how do we stop that? I said, well, and I thought about it. I said, well, I'm going to say probably in February, get in your boat, motor it up to Vicksburg, Mississippi, park it there through June, and then bring it back down. And you'll miss the swarming season because, boats are off the ground. Termites are not going to come up over the wheels and all that kind of stuff, but they're going to fly in. They're going to find water in the boat. Every boat's got wood in it, and that's how they infest them. All right, we mentioned Centricon. This is what I think is the hope for our future. I'm just about done. The way Centricon works, if a colony's in the ground, Chris might have 7 colonies in his yard. Mr. Jim might have 2 colonies. We don't really know. They're under the ground. I think in most cases, they're under tree, the roots of trees where they're kind of protected. And those colonies are always randomly foraging for termites. So Centricon's been out for about 25 years now. And it's the green stations that you see in a pattern around your house. They go about every 10 feet around the perimeter of your house. What that is, it's a slow-acting bait in there. And that white stuff at the bottom of that tube is the bait. And typically it's a nice round stick of bait. But the termites have eaten about 40 or 50 or 60% of it. And you see the termites on top of it. It's a slow-acting bait called novaflumeron. And what it does is when termites go to molt, M-O-L-T, they can't. So I guess I didn't mention it, but in this picture right here, in that picture, when we go from egg to larvae, the larvae are what they call instars. And termites go through about 4 or 5 molts where they have an exoskeleton, and as they're growing, their body gets too big for that exoskeleton, so it cracks in half and they shake it off, kind of like a soft-shell crab would do. A soft-shell crab is a crab that's just molted. The skin's soft so we can eat it. So they go through about 4 or 5 of these molts. What novaflumeron does is when they molt, it doesn't let them make the product to reform their skeleton, and they just die. They can't, what they call reskeleratize. So they just die at that point. So we feed the Centricon bait to the termites, and as each individual termite in a colony is is molting, they die. They can't get through the process. It just kills them that way. Once the worker termites start dying, all of a sudden the queen and the soldiers and the swarmers are not being fed, and the colony starts to die in. It kind of implodes on itself. So that's how we kill the colonies with Centricon. It's a unique way to treat them. With liquid treatments, they crawl into our barrier, they die. The colony, that queen, just keeps making termites. The colony survives. But with Centricon, once they get into that bait and feed on it and carry it back, they're going to regurgitate it, pass it around through their backside. The other termites in the colony, the soldiers that never leave, the workers that never leave, the king and queen, they're going to feed on it. When it comes time to molt, they can't. And so the colony slowly dies in. So we can eliminate a colony in Chris's yard. Over time, we can eliminate the termites in an area. And this is going to sound like I'm trying to sell stuff, but I'm really not. So I had a band I used to like, and one of their albums was called Safety in Numbers. And what I tell people is, if Chris has if he has a Centricon system around his house and you don't, but the termites in your neighbor's backyard find his stations before they find your house can be protected from that colony in your neighbor's yard by Chris's bait stations. That makes sense, okay? In other words, let's say Mike's got 5 colonies in his backyard, but they find Chris's stations first before they find your house, which they're going to find eventually. They'll feed on Chris's stations, return it back to the colonies in Mike's yard, and that colony slowly dies. So other people can get protection from Chris's Centricon system, if that makes sense. So what I tell people is that, and this is where it sounds like I'm trying to sell stuff, but I'm really not. The more Centricon systems you have in a given area, the safer it is for everybody. There's safety in numbers. And that was an album from a band I used to like, but anyway, we won't go there. So in essence, we can sterilize an area of Formosan termite activity. I don't think we're there yet. When I talk to people in New Orleans, Centricon's really big in New Orleans because they've had bad Formosan termite problems for a long time. We have them worse here now. But they'll say, Dave, and here's the key. They say, we see less swarming now because everybody's got Centricon. So think about this. Remember I told you Formosan termites are really good at starting above ground infestations. And remember I said it's really hard to keep your house perfectly sealed from Formosan termites during swarm season. But if we kill the colonies in an area and we reduce the swarming, we've reduced the potential from termites coming up into your house. We've also reduced the potential from termites coming into your house from up above. So I think long term, and and I'm pretty sure of it, I think Centricon is going to be our answer. I really do. And more, in my industry, more and more companies are going to Centricon. There are some companies that will not do traditional liquid treatments anymore. They just do Centricon. My company's not there yet. We look at each house individually. If you've got a small house, it's an easy slab, high visible, little bit of drilling, that kind of stuff. It might set up better for a traditional style liquid treatment. The thing you have to understand about liquid treatments is that we put that chemical in the ground, it's got residual activity, but over time it weakens, it degrades, it breaks down to the point where maybe there's not enough chemical left so that termites can get into the house. So with liquid treatments, we have to retreat. Some companies go 5 years, my company goes 8 years. If you have a contract with me and it's a liquid treatment contract, we're probably going to tell you after about the 8th year, hey guys, unfortunately it's time to retreat. The chemical barrier probably isn't as good as we want it to be. Rather than have you have termites in your house and be mad at us, we think it's best to retreat your house. With Centricon, as long as you maintain it, and we come out and check it all the time, and we replace those baits when they get fed on or they break down to the point, it's all part of the system, it'll go on forever. So, when Captain Kirk's going off to battle the Klingons in the 23rd century, if you got Centricon around your house, you're still protected. So that's the best way I can say it. All right, one more slide, if I could. Let me see if this is the slide I'm looking for. Yeah, that's it. All right, so when you do Centricon, you got to put them around the house. If people have a big driveway, the system protocol says, well, you got to drill a hole, and you got to put that bait tube in the ground underneath the hole, and then we put this cap on top of it. That's the bottom of the cap. So this is one of my employees opening up the cap, and I don't know if you can see it, but the top of that bait tube is right there. And it was just totally eaten up by termites. So, lots of times when we see that, the homeowner goes into a panic. Oh my God, I got termites. What are we going to do? And we have to say, no, it's a good thing because we've got the Centricon system. It's feeding your termites, and we know it's going to go back to the colony, and we're going to eliminate that colony. So one more slide maybe, I think, and I think that's it. We won't worry about that. I think I'm done, folks. Any questions?
Yeah. All right, so the swarm is both male and female, right?
Correct.
So it's time to kill them like that.
Yeah. If you could, yeah. So I think we missed a few slides in here. I have a slide from about 4 years ago, and let me tell you about this real quick, if I could. I'm sorry to interrupt you. So when the swarmers, the reproductives, the alates land, they shake their wings off, right? And then the female will lift up her abdomen and she emits a sex pheromone. The male termite senses that and he will follow her. He will latch onto her abdomen and follow her wherever he goes. So I guess about 3 years ago, I was on my front porch and that was happening. And I took a couple of pictures of it, but it didn't show up in there. I thought I had those pictures, but I have pictures of a female wandering all across my porch with the male just latched onto her abdomen as quick as, as tight as he could. And she's trying to find damp soil or damp wood. They're going to fall into it or dig into it, and they're going to mate, and they're going to become the king and queen of the colony. The female will immediately lay eggs that typically are going to be all worker termites, because they're too early of a colony to have swarmers or soldiers. They got to have worker termites who can go out, find wood, and come back and feed them. So the chances of a colony surviving are hard. Mother Nature is very, very hard. Blown in insulation or spray foam? Spray foam? Okay. All right, I'm going to get to that in a minute. Let me just tell you this. Think about this thing. Mother Nature is very cruel. So if colony A in Mike's backyard, or Laura's backyard, puts out 70,000 swarmers, the vast majority are going to get eaten by something. So 70,000 swarmers, we're going to say 60,999 termites are going to get eaten out of that 70,000, okay? But 10 termites survive. If those 10 termites start 5 new colonies, you see what's going on. We're in an exponential explosion right now, and I don't know any way to stop it. If the mosquito truck comes around your neighborhood when they're swarming, he'll kill those. The termites are easy to kill. They're really not that hard. Sometimes it's hard to get to them. But if the mosquito truck's in your yard and termites are swarming, they're going to kill all those swarmers. They're going to die. But that's just the way it is. But spray foam. All right. My honest thoughts about spray foam. Don't like it, but we have to live with it. It's an excellent sound deadener, and it's an excellent insulator. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. It's excellent at that. It's great. Unfortunately, if there's a water problem, it holds water, and termites love to get into it. They don't feed on it, but they nest in it to feed on the wood next to it. And if you come to my laboratory, you'll see some examples of that. But that's a great question. Spray foam, I tell people, listen, if you're going to put it in your house, I got to live with it. One of the things that, look, I'm not trying to sell stuff, okay? But one of the things you can do is this product called Boracare. Boracare is boric acid in a glycol formulation. And this company that makes this product, and I've seen it happen, when we spray, we typically mix it up and spray it onto all the wood in a house. And it's done on new construction before you put your insulation in. We spray, insulation goes in next, and you sheetrock it up. Once we put that Boracare onto your wood, it's boron, it's the element boron. The element boron is really long lasting, and that glycol helps soak it into wood. And they say it'll last about 35 to 50 years. So if you're going to put spray foam insulation, the best thing you can do on a new house is spray it with Boracare before you insulate it. And we have contractors that we work for now, and as part of their package when they're selling to new homeowners, some of them build it into the package. Some of them, we have literature that we've given them, and they'll talk to the homeowner and say, look, this is the best way to protect your house long term. So anyway, that's spray foam. But Boracare is really the best option if you're going to put spray foam in your house. All right. Any other questions? And I know, Chris, I'm done. Listen, I want to say thank y'all for listening to me.
I've got a comment. We got the Centricon at my parents' house, which is a 70-year-old house,
Mm-hmm.
in 2019, and we had swarms. It was big. That first picture you showed, that's what the swarms around the house were like in 2019. We haven't had hardly any swarms since then.
So that's a good point. So remember I said in New Orleans, they said, Dave, we're not seeing swarms like we used to. Last year, actually the year before last, in the company we started saying, let's try to keep track of what neighborhoods have heavy swarms and what neighborhoods don't. And we're thinking, well, this could be a function of Centricon systems that are put in the ground. And my company's not the only company that does it. There's 30 companies out there that you can get Centricon systems from. But and I think that people that have a lot of them, Main Street has a lot of them. There's a lot of people on Main Street that have Centricon systems. And we're not really sure that we saw less swarming in that area, but we think we did. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. And look, I wish I could say Centricon was perfect. It's pretty darn close, I'll tell you that. The stations are put about 10 feet apart from each other. And so there's 9 feet or so, 9 feet, almost 10 feet, where there's no stations. But termites find them. It's just amazing how it happens. I have seen a failure or two, maybe, but in most cases, it's the best way to protect your house now. Long term. Any other questions?
Something called a bait station?
Sir?
A bait station?
What about them? That's a green bait stations, yeah. Yes, they call them bait stations. And again, they got those above ground components that we put in boats, so. Any other questions?
Does the flying ant, does that destroy your property also?
Not really. I mean, so ants don't feed on wood, but they do sting. They can be a health hazard. They're basically a nuisance pest, basically. And all ant species swarm. You know, a funny aside, you'll see these little bitty, tiny black ants in your kitchen. Lots of times it's around your sink and they're feeding on sugar or they're feeding on leftover stuff and people call them sugar ants. I've heard people call them piss ants. You know, I've heard it all. But they're actually, if you start researching them, they're called the little black ant. That's what they're called, the little black ant. And I'll tell people, oh man, we got sugar ants. And I'll look at them and they're tiny. And I say, oh no, you got the little black ant. I know they're a little black. I know that they're a little black, but they're sure. No, they're called the little black ant. And that way, and then I said, okay, let me impress these people. Their genus species name is Monomorium minimum. You know, so that's what they really are. Yeah. Yeah, Monomorium minimum. Oh yeah, you got piss ants. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It'd be worth to mention about the crazy ants.
Oh yeah, I talked to you about the crazy ants. So listen, for most, does everybody have another minute? I know I'm killing your time here, and I'm sorry about that. So remember I said Formosan termites are an introduced species. We brought them back after World War II. Fire ants are an introduced species. Has anybody seen the Asian cockroach? Looks like a German cockroach, but they fly. Introduced from another part of the world. We bring, the world travels everywhere, and we bring these bugs back. So what you're talking about is technically called the tawny crazy ant. When they were first found in Houston, the Houston area, the pest control operator who first saw them, his name was Tom Raspberry. So he started calling them raspberry ants because they kind of have like an orangey reddish appeal to them. And then eventually researchers discovered, oh no, it's the tawny crazy ant from the south parts of the Caribbean, and we brought them back probably in cruise ships or something. But so the thing about tawny crazy ants is the numbers are incredible. They're not hard to kill, but to kill all of them is hard, if that makes sense. And I think you told me that they got into some electricity and they destroyed the electricity. And what happens is the numbers, they'll use it at nesting sites, and the numbers just get so big that they short things out. But, you know, and when tawny crazy ants come into an area, they take it over because of their sheer numbers. They destroy fire ants, which we've had, well, since the 60s, I guess. They'll destroy fire ant colonies, and they'll take over your yard. And I think what's going to happen, the best way to control them is just to spray heavy as often as you can, like about every 75 days or so. You got to spray big quantities of chemical, unfortunately, in your yard to kill them.
You know, this question comes in my mind all the time. They'll be swarming, and I told my wife, I said, where are the bats at? This would be like a buffet or going to a casino to eat. I don't see no,
So if you want to see something funny, next Formosan swarm season, actually not funny, when they're swarming at night, turn your outside light on and go outside, step a few feet away, and watch the Mediterranean geckos come out and feed on termites till they can't move. And by the way, Mediterranean geckos are not native to the United States. That's an introduced species too. So there you go. All right, listen, everybody, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any questions, just come see me.
Thank you.
Thank you.